Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar hosted by CBX Software and Cotton USA. My name is Mander, and I'm the Marketing Director for CBX Software and the moderator for today's session. Now, we just start with some household rules. Now, the webinar will run for approximately 40 minutes. The webcast will be recorded and will be available for download about a month after the event. We will record the webinar. All attendees will be muted during the webcast. And if you have any questions regarding the webinar, please contact me on the email address on the screen. Now, first of all, I just want to quickly introduce the speaker. Our speaker today is Karin Malmström. Karin is the Director of China and Northeast Asia for Cotton Council International. Karin has over 30 years China-relevant experience gained from a variety of industries. And in today's session, Karin will be sharing us the latest global cotton information and insights on how U.S. cotton can offer advantage to the textile industries in challenging times. Now, on that note, I'm just going to pass it to Karin and let her take it from here.
Good morning, everyone. Well, for those of you who joined me last time, welcome back. And for those of you who are newcomers to this webinar, well, welcome. And as mentioned, yes, I represent Cotton USA, and my markets are in China and Northeast Asia, very dynamic regions. And we do cover the globe. And one exciting bit of information that some of you who may or may not be our licensees are, previously we had required a garment or textile product to have 93% cotton, 50% or more of which needs to be U.S. cotton in order to be licensed by us. But now, because we are recognizing the trends in blending and many different products, we want to reach out more to working with global brands and retailers. So we have set new guidelines for becoming a Cotton USA licensee. We're very, very excited about this. So we hope to enter into more partnerships around the world. So if you are using 51% or more U.S. cotton in your textile products, you are indeed eligible to become a Cotton USA licensee. So at the end of this webinar, I've got my email address, and if you're interested, please don't hesitate to contact me. So let's begin. And before, of course, you know, it's a global community and it's getting more and more connected. So wherever cotton is, we've got offices. And if you want to source cotton products and U.S. cotton products, well, we're there and you can contact us and we're happy to help you. And we also have lots of sourcing events around the world. So if you want to become involved with those, also, please get in touch. So let's start. Now, you know, for any sourcing, pricing is very important. And recently, you know, cotton prices, there was a little bit of a worry that they had gone up, they'd increased, but now they've kind of come down a little bit, they've stabilized. So people are becoming more and more, I would say, confident about the new, going into the new season. So generally, you know, the marketing season starts the 1st of August and goes to September. So now we're coming right to the end of the marketing season, and you know, people are waiting for the new crops to come out. And this is the period where people get the jitters because they're saying, uh-oh, do we have enough supply and at what price? So usually this time of year, you know, they're waiting for the new crop to come out and what the pricing points will be. So this is kind of a critical time. The good news, though, it has stabilized and people are quite, I would say, confident, not only about the new crop, but about the availability of quality cotton. This year, we can tell you that the U.S. crop is very, very good. So we're very excited about that. And then you look at the trends, you know, and the Chinese prices. You know, the Chinese prices of this in the recent years, because they've set a price point, which is much higher than the global price. They set it a few years ago when prices were rocket sky high. And it has kind of been on this trend ever since. But now they're becoming more and more in line with the international market. But still, they're quite high. So again, though, if you look in the last months, it has stabilized. So I think people are a little bit kind of breathing easier now, seeing that they will be able to get cotton at a reasonable price in the coming months. So the world balance sheet. Now this is important to look at because at this, August, September time, we're really seeing what the trends are for this year, because this year, marketing year, is now over. So we can with confidence say, okay, this actually is the real number. It's not speculation. So for this marketing year, we have stocks. Of course, they're a bit higher. Production also was lower because the stocks were higher. And so people were saying, well, if I grow the cotton, where in the world is it going to go, especially if China has slapped on these the import duties that do not allow them, or they do not want to issue additional quota. But so the stocks are up this year. Production is down. Supply is a little lower. So the market is feeling a bit more robust. The mill use is also gaining ground, as you see from last year. In the last couple of years, it has gone up a bit. So there has been a drawdown of stocks, and this is including the Chinese stocks, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because this is a very, very important point now. So now we're taking China out of this mix, and it's looking much more, I would say, normal. Because usually stocks, you look down, you say stocks to use ratio, 40s. It's a good, healthy percentage. So the beginning stocks are still a little higher. Production is a little lower. Supply is a little lower. Mill use is still, quite good, and the demand is stable. So anyway, it looks better than it has in a few years. So now the U.S. also, you can see by this chart, the stocks are a little bit up. Production this year has been down, but then when you look at the August numbers for next year, very interesting that the U.S. somehow is quite bullish on growing more cotton. I mean, there are a number of reasons for this, because I think the price point is quite good at this stabilized level in order for them to make ends meet. And I also see that there are potential for markets in addition to China, because then I'll get into that a little bit later. But we do have some very interesting supply chain dynamics in the making here. So supply is a little bit down, but next year it's anticipated it will be up. But then it's anticipated that mill use could also be up. So when you look at the demand for next year, from this year, 2015-16, to the 2016-17 year, there still seems to be quite some optimism about cotton consumption. So here we go to cotton production. And as mentioned in my last webinar, India has taken over China as the world's largest producer of cotton. And this also will definitely remain for the foreseeable future, because you look at China and these numbers from 2012, 13, 14, 15, it just continues to decrease. And this year we think is, well, in my opinion, it's sort of like this watershed point where the Chinese want to hold their production around 5 million tons, but this year it's anticipated they will not even reach 5 million tons. So this is something to note. And also the prediction next year is it will go even lower. So in some ways that is also the reason why other countries are taking notice of this, and especially in the United States, we're thinking, well, people are going to need cotton, very high quality cotton at that, because the trend in China now is to go for upgrading their industry, and so they need higher quality cotton. So this is what the U.S. is now really on about, and sustainably and responsibly grown, traceable. So you can see the U.S., the prediction is it will bounce right back to 14, 15 numbers. This year was down a little bit, but it's going to be significantly higher, we expect, next year. So it's just some trends for you. And the funny thing is, China, the consumption is still very high and stable. It's the largest cotton consumption country in the world. India is the second, and Pakistan the third, of course. This is also high cotton consumption and growing countries. Interestingly, in China, there is a gap now between the less than 5 million tons that they produce, and then the 7.4 this year and 7.6 predicted next year that they need. And this is a very, very interesting point. Please take note of this, and I'm going to come back to that in the slides to come. So exports, U.S. continues to be the world's largest exporter of cotton. And it's just interesting is that where the cotton is going now, less to China because of the WTO 894,000 tons. Once they reach that, they have not issued any more quota for imports. So it's very hard to import raw cotton. So many people are getting around that by just ordering the cotton in other countries, spinning it there, and then potentially exporting it to China to be knit or woven. So it's very interesting how things are evolving here. So United States still a big exporter, India, Brazil, Australia. Uzbekistan is also a very interesting country. So to keep that in mind, because it does have a direct correlation with the One Belt, One Road initiative in China. Uzbekistan cotton and Chinese interests are becoming more and more linked because the countries are very near. So imports also now. Bangladesh has surpassed China, and Vietnam is right there up there with China. So you can see it's predicted in the coming years that Bangladesh still will surpass the other countries to be the number one import country of cotton. So, and because of the WTO tariff rate quota situation, China hasn't issued any additional above the 894,000 tons. You can see what's happened to yarn. Just when they started doing that and the stock reserves are very high, what did people do? They started importing cotton because there was no tariff rate obligations on that. But now, this year, because China started to release the stocks out of the reserves, the auction, you can see what's happened. They've released a lot of cotton onto the market in China, and that means that they have used their domestic cotton to start spinning again. So when the yarn now is, more yarn is starting again to be spun in China, look at the huge drop-off in yarn imports to China. This is absolutely dramatic. This is a very clear slide of what has happened in the last year because of the release of the stocks and the auctions of the reserves in China. So, and then you can see by the numbers who is actually the largest importer of yarn to China, and that it used to be India and Pakistan, and now, interestingly enough, Vietnam has become the number one importer of yarn. And it is interesting because many of the large Chinese companies, to get around the TRQ quota issue of the raw materials not being able to get into China, they've simply set up their spinning mills in neighboring countries, which one? Vietnam, of course. So they spin a lot of yarn in Vietnam, and they ship it just some kilometers over the border back into China, where they weave it or knit it. So that's actually one of the dynamics of the supply chain that's happening. It's quite interesting. Now, let's talk about China and the macroeconomic trends that really do influence the textile industry. There are contradictions of the market and planned economy. They want more of a market mechanisms to influence the textile industry. So they're trying to play around with, let's have more price, and let's have the market decide more things. However, because there are many government controls and policies in place, these market mechanisms are not really allowed to manifest themselves. So they still have to work out that. There's a plan, China comes from a planned economy base, but now they're moving more into market forces. So they still have some big things to solve. Another trend that China is going toward is a circular economic development model. And what that means is less waste and more recycling and more, let's say, how can you innovate without simply a one-way street? It has to come back. And we kept hearing in many events and conferences recently about closing the loop. And this also has absolute direct correlation to our industry. I'll talk about that later. The other interesting idea is that a lot of Chinese companies are going overseas direct investment, and this is cited by the World Bank. So it was suggested that why don't they use this SEZ, or Economic Development Zone model, to literally build up these zones, special economic zones, and so it's almost to contain them and have a model so they go abroad in a more orderly fashion, because it could be kind of chaotic. I mean, there are a lot of things to be worked on, and this also relates to the strengthening of the legal and financial frameworks. Because can you imagine, companies who really haven't been out before, not really knowing how to go out, what to do? There's lots of legal and financial, there's many regulations, and there's also local regulations by the host countries. And this was also brought up as a very important thing to consider. But the main theme is Chinese overseas direct investments have for the first time exceeded the foreign direct investments by companies in China. This is a huge, big development. So there's more Chinese investment going out than coming in from foreign companies. Okay? So, and the Chinese in all fields, including the textile industry, they are hoping that innovation and technology will help them to upgrade their industries. And they are open and looking for new cooperation models, with partners. So this actually is some very, very interesting developments to just contemplate here. Now, specifically about these trends in the textile industry, this year China started to implement or to, I would say, announce the 3 pins policy. What is that? In Chinese, it's 三品, and the pin is a Chinese character, and it means, well, the 3 quality, product varieties, and brands. They want to focus on these 3 areas in the textile industry to develop, and they want to encourage all the Chinese industries to really focus on upgrading in these areas. So quality is a huge, huge, huge factor. So they want to upgrade, and they want to innovate and have different product varieties to have more market differentiation, and of course develop their brands. Now the other thing is, because they are more a controlled, I would say, economy, they want to establish what they call mechanisms, 机制, for integrating entire supply chains. So that means that they want to establish hubs, they want to be very well organized, try to set up these things that will really work well and be efficient. So yes, the textile industry is moving from east to west. I can definitely vouch for that. I have just been to Xinjiang again, and what we call translocation. It is happening, and up to 20 million spindles are planned for Xinjiang, 11 of which are already operational. This has accelerated the speed at which they are establishing their textile hub out in West China. So, and they're going to be establishing another set of economic zones. There's going to be a garment facility in Kashgar. It's right along the Silk Road. And then the question is, will Xinjiang spindles, 20 million of them, use all of the Xinjiang cotton? This is a very important question, which actually we don't know the answer to yet. Because if that means that all of the cotton grown in Xinjiang, which will be the lion's share of the Chinese cotton, about 75%, then where are the mills in the east going to get their cotton if all the good cotton out in Xinjiang is going to be used there on site? So this is a really another big question we are looking at. So as mentioned, they're upgrading all their industries from quantity to quality, and our timing for U.S. Cotton having our quality conference on the 10th of October was perfect timing, and this is all about introducing all of the best practices, the gold standard for global best practices in cotton production, and how it's made from the high quality fiber into the yarn, and then from the yarn to the fabric. And so it's a very suitable conference for addressing this three pins policy. And then, of course, don't forget the ongoing regional trade agreements, all these different agreements, and I'll show a map at the end, but the CPEC is quite interesting, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. They're also very aggressively going ahead with that. Now, for the textile industry, something to keep in mind is Industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution, which has everything to do with cyber physical systems. Sensors talking to each other. It's actually here. It's very exciting, and it's going to be the future of the textile industry. And the other thing that is indisputably and inextricably linked to the future is the sustainability issue, which is actually a standard now, has to be going forward for the industry. Water and toxic chemical treatment, energy-saving models, dyeing and finishing segment, very, very important. Whoever can crack getting that segment sustainably done, I think will really have the power over the whole textile supply chain, because that's the missing link, that's the weak link in the whole textile supply chain, dyeing and finishing segment. And also an interesting thing is closing the loop between what happens to the clothes after the consumer uses it. Well, there are interesting things going on with some large global retailers and brands, saying, okay, recycle your clothes, and we're going to make them back into fiber, and we're going to make them back into very, very trendy, fashionable, high-quality clothes from the clothes that you just wore. So they're closing that loop, so they don't want to waste it. It just doesn't go into landfill anymore. That's a huge topic that large retailers and brands are addressing. The other interesting thing that's happening, the decisions made at design level, which materials to use to achieve closed loop. And it's all about thinking forward. It's almost like Back to the Future. You're thinking forward to the end of cycle or life of that garment and how you can put it right back into the supply chain. And this is the way we are thinking now. So when we talk to our designers for brands and retailers, say, hey, cotton is already a sustainable, natural material. How can we even do one better and see how we can have the end of life reuse? So I mentioned the cotton reserves. So starting the year in 2016, there were around 10 metric ton in state reserves, and as of the 3rd of May, the government started selling the various cotton grades at around 30,000 metric tons each day. Now, they extended the auction until the end of September. So by the end of the month, over 2.66 metric tons were sold. Now, this is really important to know, because at this rate, then so they will start the auctions next year, 2017, in March. So at this rate, they're going to really close down on their reserves, I would say, quicker than we anticipated, right? So we don't know if they're going to issue TRQ above the WTO requirements in 2017. We just don't know. It will depend on supply and demand. So we think, well, if the auctioning keeps going and the spinning keeps going like it is in China, as the recent trend indicates, there could be as little as 3 metric tons in the reserves in 1 or 2 years, which is much quicker than anticipated. And as mentioned, China's spinning industry is slowly regaining ground. So after this auction period and after this marketing year, which is ending right now, China is considering to update the new cotton policies for next year. So we still don't know what those are, but we do know that they want very, very clear policies in place before they start their next auction of state reserves next year. So, in many ways, we have already heard that in a quicker than usual turnaround, the reserves may become a non-issue. So, just in closing, you know, the One Belt, One Road, it's not just a theory anymore. It's happening. I've seen it. It's extremely aggressive and at an accelerated pace. And not in so much as, you know, they're contacting neighboring countries very, very actively. They just had this Sino-Eurasia Expo out in Urumqi for all different kinds of products from all different Eurasian countries. People from Europe were coming, you know, the stands and their neighbors. And so it's very, very dynamic out there. And what that means is geographically, Xinjiang is a major hub, both for transport, for trade. So we're going to see more and more accelerated development in Xinjiang. And so China is looking for new mechanisms and models and cooperation methods across industries and borders. And this, in turn, creates new opportunities. So it is quite exciting, but then again, you have to do your due diligence because it is literally the Wild West. And you need to know the legal ramifications and the financial implications, right? So you got to do your homework, do your due diligence if you're going to invest. And the other thing on their radar, everybody's talking about, is the circular economic development, a key to sustainable practices. People just don't blindly go in and invest, then all of a sudden, as an afterthought, think, oops, you know, what are we going to do with the wastewater? What are we going to do? No, it has to be built in to development. And then the future really is here. Industry 4.0, we have to keep thinking about the fourth industrial revolution, which is coming, it's here. And then the three pins policy of quality, varieties, and brands, that in China is also a trend for the future. And then a big one is really the translocations going on across the whole global textile supply chain, even to Africa. So we're going to see some very interesting developments in that. Overseas Chinese investments, very much accelerated. And then one concept is the premiumization of the textile industry. And what really does that mean? I mean, it's not the down and dirty, just one-way street anymore. It's really all about upgrade and about quality, but in integrity across the whole textile chain down to retail. So we are going to experience some disruption and restructuring. But the good news is we see here in recent months about price stabilization. So that kind of puts the jitters off a little bit of the people who know that they're going to be going through some bumpy times potentially. So anyway, there's some very interesting things happening. And of course, I love to end with a map because this is what it's all about. And you look at China, you look at the West out there, the yellow line, Urumqi, it goes all the way through Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. These are all the stands that are very, very dynamically engaging with China and vice versa. Then you look at Pakistan, and from southwest China, there is a city called Kashgar, and from there on the southern Silk Route, you're going to see a road go right through Pakistan down to the southwest, down to a port called Gwadar. And this is quite interesting because they're developing through some rather disputed territory. We'll see how smoothly that goes. But anyway, very ambitious plans. And again, this is a grand theme and a grand scheme. And it's all very exciting to see how everything will unfold in the future. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Karin. That was very informative. And I just want to thank you, everyone, for attending today's event. I want to say that we're very excited to have a range of different retailers, brands, consultants, and other service providers in today's session. And before we wrap up, I just want to let you know that this webinar is sponsored by CBX Software, and it is a part of our ongoing Global Sourcing Thought Leadership Series. The CBX Thought Leadership Education Series, which includes many webinars like the ones you like the one you've just attended, as well as other industry reports and white papers. Now, our effort is focused on providing actionable insights for retailers and brands on how you can improve your global sourcing, quality, and supplier management programs. Now, if you want to find out more about the CBX Thought Leadership Series, please go to the URL on the screen. Now, to conclude, I just want to thank you again for attending today's session. I hope you found the information useful, and I would certainly like to have you at our next session. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact either Karin or myself on the email address on the screen. Thank you, and have a good day.